It being 7 p.m., November 14th, 2018, I'd like to call the November meeting of the Lisle Library District Board of Trustees to order. Roll call, please.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Jay Fisher.
Here.
Richard Flint.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Emily Swistek.
Here.
Lonry Wang.
Here.
Quorum is present. Item 2 on the agenda is opportunity for visitors to speak. 5 minutes to address the board on any topic. If any of the members present wish to address the board, sir, if you could come up to the microphone, please.
Can't use the stool.
No?
I promise not to trip on it.
Okay.
Good evening. I believe on the agenda tonight is the new levy for the coming year. And I would just want to make a couple of comments regarding the letter that went out from the director regarding the levy. Probably the good news is I do see at least some level of reductions in the levy versus the prior year. And reading down further on the letter, like the second paragraph, it talks about the taxing body, the LLD, recognizes the importance of quality service, staff, resources, programming for our residents, and providing comprehensive value is my goal as director. And I focus on the word value when I talk about, think about the library. And generally speaking, I don't think what's that kills it?
And if you could speak into the microphone, please,
Okay. Excuse me.
so the
I
people
don't
watching
think
online can
of
hear.
the library with the term value. And there's probably two reasons that I don't think of the library in terms of value. One of which is the cost of operations. Generally speaking, you're spending about $4.5 million per year, particularly over the last few years, to run the library. When you look at October year-to-date, based on what you've already spent this year, with the year a third over, you're still on a pace to spend about $4.5 million to run the library. The point that I have is that compared to your peers, compared to other libraries that are in the 28,000 to 33,000 range for population, most of them are spending less money, far less money than you're spending. Perfect example is Woodridge. Woodridge, our neighbor, they're a little bigger. Based on their estimate for 18, they're on a calendar year. Through December, they're expecting to come in about just under $3.5 million. So one of the issues becomes, do I get value for my money? In essence, I'm paying a premium for this library compared to other libraries that are operating for less money. So that's point number one. The other point has to do with cash on hand. And the cash on hand over recent years is growing from my standpoint as a taxpayer, an alarming rate. Where's this money coming from? It's coming from the taxpayers. But I went back and looked at your old audit reports going back to 2011. And back in 2011, under current assets and investments, the library showed just under $6.9 million in cash and investments. The last year you have with an audit is 17, and you were just under $10.2 million. And while we don't have a completed audit yet for 18, based on the Treasurer's report from June 18, we had 10 million, just under $10.8 million in cash on hand. And over this years, when you look at this, when you look at the revenue and expense, the revenue is so much higher than the cost to run the library. When I see $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 being added year after year to the treasury, I can only assume I'm being overtaxed. I'm paying too much money to run the library. You get plenty of money, and there's this excess left over. Another one, just to give you an example, Woodridge, at their last audit, cash on hand, cash in investments, just under $3 million. So again, when it comes to value, it doesn't seem it's been there. And the amount of money that's being taken out of the taxpayers year after year, you've been very bold in what you've collected from the taxpayers. And my only point is, if you're really so bold in taking that money from the taxpayers, maybe in your levy, you could be a little bolder in returning some of those tax dollars to the, some of that money to the taxpayers by maybe inching up what you already have suggested on your levy. I think one other comment was made in that letter that I think the director talked about. She'd like to have 6 to 8 months worth of cash on hand in the corporate fund.
You can finish up, please.
Okay? At 8 months, let's go wild and say you spend $400,000 a month. That would be, you need $3.2 million in the corporate account, which currently sits at the end of June at $6.8 million. So there's a good deal of room to increase or reduce the levy amount again this year. Thanks.
Anyone else wish to address the board?
Oh, I hate this, really.
Again, into the microphone, and you have 5 minutes.
Oh, you won't need that,
Okay.
believe me. Is this, am I wrong? I'm asking you this. Is this not the same thing that the last 2 board meetings have gone over? The amount of money spent in comparison to other libraries of comparable size and population? That whole PowerPoint presentation, really well done by Tatiana on all the same stuff. Is that the same question I'm hearing now again? When is it gonna end? Do you use this library a lot? Sir, do you use it? Are you all here frequently? Do you check out a lot of books and? No. So you're paying for something you don't use. Illogical. As a heavy user myself, I have nothing but praise for this library, for everything they've done over 20 years. My family's pleased. They get anything I want. Now, if I want to get it from another country, I have to pay, but Australia, you know, I pay, but it's worth it to me. Every penny that goes in from my tax dollars is worth it to me because I use the service. I don't go to a store and complain about their return policies if I don't shop there. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move to item 3, which is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any changes? If not, then
I move to approve the consent agenda.
we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
There was a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, roll call please.
Richard Flynn.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Emily Swistek.
Aye.
Lon Marie Wang.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. The consent agenda is approved. Item 4 on the agenda is the director's report. Director Weinstein.
Okay, happy to announce that both the staff and trustees have completed their annual sexual harassment training. LIRA, and this is of course in accordance with our newish policy 901. LIRA, our insurance and risk agency, provided the in-person training for staff and then provided the online training for trustees. LIRA also received a grant from ILA, which also allowed the agency to purchase color-active ice alert signs, and I have a picture of it if you didn't see it on the way in. So it's climate activated, and this little guy turns blue. Beth has the silver, so they say it will help. It's effective in helping preventing slips and falls, and we received 2 signs. We have 1 up. We are awaiting our 2nd sign. And in other news regarding grants, let me, I just lost my place, I'm sorry. The trustees have been sent ILA trustee fax file chapters, and there's a link to the Illinois Veterans History Project, as well as a Rails recommended video. And this is to fulfill our requirements for the per capita grant, which we pass in, well, we can either pass in December or January, but January is our deadline. It's January 15th, I believe, yeah. We've also supplied the board with a pamphlet in your inboxes from the Secretary of State. They just mailed those out. And then we've also posted a poster from the Veterans History Project on our community board downstairs. Okay, and then President Fisher and I attended the intergovernmental meeting on October 11th. I'm going to save some time, but the details are in my report. And our IT manager's been very busy this past month. As previously mentioned, we are working on a number of upgrades as well as standardizing our equipment. So a number of the projects have been completed, and those include updating our e-commerce software, updating the browsers on our public PCs. We've installed the West End security cameras. We've updated our Windows to our servers, and we've also updated the software on all of our instruction lab PCs that are behind you in this storage box. And then we also have switch upgrades and installation scheduled for later this week. And then the library provided 2 college tours this past month. Technical Services Director Laura Murph provided a tour for 14 students at the College of DuPage, and that was for an acquisitions class, and she talked about library vendors and purchasing materials for public libraries. And then librarian Jean Demas provided a tour for 13 North Central College students, and they were enrolled in a class called Culturally Responsive Practices, and the tour focused on our literacy materials. And we'll get to our tax levy when we get to that item on the agenda. A few other notes that aren't in my report. The Friends of the Library District had their book and media sale in October, and according to the president, approximately 270 people attended that 3-day sale. And Northern Illinois Food Bank sent us a Thanksgiving card thanking us for our participation in the summer lunches program. And in the card it says, with your help, we provided nearly 66 million meals last year to families across Northern Illinois. And we do intend on participating in that service this coming summer. And then lastly, the United for Libraries subscription that we have for the trustees, we finally got our Voice magazine. So that comes in paper format. I put all of the trustees' names on here, so I'm going to, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and I'll give it to Marjorie, and she can check her name off after reading it, and then just putting it in your mailbox slots. If you want to read it, if you don't want to read it, exit off and pass it on. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's all.
Thank
May
you.
I make a suggestion about the Voice magazine? I think we should have a clock running, so if people don't pick it up and read it within a certain time, it can go to the next person without undue waiting. So, you know, checking it off is a good idea, but maybe we could put the date on which it came to our mailbox, and someone could check, and if, say it spends more than 1 week or 10 days in one person's mailbox, the next person can just assume that it's theirs without it being checked.
Well, that's up to you.
That seems to have a consensus amongst the board members.
That's fine.
So,
Is there a way that we would know it got put in our mailbox if we have a
But I don't want to
limited
get
amount of
charged for
time?
tonight. I'm sorry, Liz.
well, you know, maybe the person that put it in the mailbox can send the person an email notifying them that it's there.
Okay.
That way, they can start the clock. So,
Lots of pressure.
you're the first one started off, Marjorie. So,
Well, here,
comments and questions for the director.
I had a couple of questions. I know the Friends of the Library had 270 people attend the 3-day session. Do they keep any other stats, like, you know, how many books they sell or how much money they make or anything?
I'm sure they do. I've reached out, and maybe they will show up at our December meeting. I haven't heard back yet.
Okay. And if we have questions on the circulation report and the stats, do we do them now or do we wait?
questions, you
It's-
can
yeah.
ask.
Okay, and maybe, going back to the circulation report, maybe you told me this already and I forgot. There's youth services non-print, and I cannot remember what that would be.
Generally AV, movies, music,
Video games?
video games.
And at the bottom, I know we track Polaris catalog holds, and what percentage get placed and what percentage gets checked out. I'm assuming that the digital media is not included in that, is it?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a way that we can also keep those stats for our digital media?
I believe you asked this before, and we have two platforms, and they collect statistics differently. And one of the platforms we are a part of is a consortium platform.
Mhm.
So I think there is some difficulty there. I can look into it.
If you don't mind, because a couple of my neighbors came to me and they use Overdrive. Matter of fact, we have a whole book club that the goal is to listen to audiobooks. So if you show up with a paper copy, you're in trouble. But some of them claim to be waiting like a year for an audio book, you know, and I think we need to know the statistics before we decide if we're comfortable with them. But right now, I don't know what to say to them.
I will also say that we're investigating some other platforms as well, so that's going to be part of our budget discussions among department directors. So.
Okay, great.
Well, I was gonna save this for the end when we have opportunity to speak, but I think this is still relevant since Liz brought it up. We talked about this before in terms of some statistics. So I think it's great to have these, but there are just so many. So we talked about, instead of having 15 to track, what are the top 5, I would say, is the leading indicator, so we don't have to look at all these. Well, if everybody wants to look at all these, it's fine, but in terms of measuring in a glance of how well we're doing as a library, is that, you know, what are the key things? Is just number of borrowers every month, is, you know, if we say digital is most important or something we want to invest it in, is that something we want to track going forward? So I'm just thinking maybe just highlighting the top 5 ones that's going to, we think, show how well we're doing in in the context of the target, what we want to be. So it's just something for the rest of the board members to consider.
I'm assuming that the reason that we get these statistics the way they are is because these are the ones that staff finds useful, or is this more just historical trustee driven?
It's been a little of both. I know that they've been enhanced. I think they became enhanced in like the 2013s. And then we've just consistently provided them because every year we mirror the year before. I think last year I provided something a little more concise, and then the board said, that's nice, but also provide these. So we've gone back to this, and then last month I also provided that 4-year
For the trend.
trend
Yes.
report, which
Yep.
also talked about our circulation statistics. And I think I communicated with Liz and Jay on this, that that's the beginning of the conversation, and I think more conversation will happen regarding circulation and spending when we start talking budgeting. So I think we can use that report forward.
In addition, Longray, I love your suggestions. In addition to that, there are some things maybe that on a monthly basis you would be willing to comment about. Like, for instance, if one of them shows a lot of negative, like a decrease, a large decrease, it would be great if you could talk about, okay, we see this trend, it's a nationwide trend, you know, these are the 3 things we're trying to do to turn it around. So, you know, I love Longray's idea, plus maybe highlighting what are the really big increases and also the really big decreases.
What do you like about Longray's idea?
Well, I think anytime you have like an entity, you want to track over time you pull out certain characteristics or certain measurements, and you say, okay, these are the, and maybe be on a page that would preface these 2 pages. These are the 5 things that we want to discuss or that are really important for us to check. Okay,
Is that what you were saying? That's not what I
Yeah,
heard.
yeah,
But
that's
is
kind
that
of what.
exactly- So
yeah,
you're saying this plus more.
Well, for me, my personal view is, I probably I want to just say 5 metrics. Everybody agree that those are really general, in a very high level, good indicator how well we're doing as a library. It could be not only these statistics, could be include like, how well we're tracking toward our budget too. That could be one of the metric. And then one of them we kind of talk about part of strategic plan is how can you improve user experience. Part of it is that we're going to say we'll have more programs, to versus before, and what will be our target for 2019? I'm going to say we're going to increase by 5%. Then every month we'll say, well, how well we're tracking toward our target. So it means nice to track backwards, but it'd be nice to kind of looking forward, hey, what our original target we set up for our library to be is increase our borrowers by 5%, compared with previous year. So we'll say, well, how we are doing compared to that. So, but we haven't really set up a target. We only right now, the statistics just look backwards, right? But it's something to think about. Maybe next time we can.
Yeah, I was going to say, thinking about
come
going
back and
forward after assuming we pass the strategic plan,
Right.
look at what we have here, talk, what would be important goals that mesh with the plan goals, the objectives there, and maybe, again, as Liz said, highlight either the data that we think meshes with that, or if there's something that staff wishes to highlight in regards to a trend or something else.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the amount of data that we get now is swamping us in terms of the 2-page. But I understand your point of trying to focus on more telling and leading indicators.
Yeah, and also kind of a gauge at a very high, just 1 page. For example, maybe this is not only for the directors or the staff or for a board member, for anybody in the public. They don't have time to look through every single data, say, how is our library doing good or not? Because some of the trends, you can see percentage of change is positive, some of them are negative. So what does it mean? Does it mean overall are we doing well as a library? So I'm just thinking it's almost like this 1-pager scorecard, and then that comes back to the director can propose what those 5 key kind of metrics will be in terms of setting those as our target for the library, right? And because you guys know kind of the business kind of the best, and again, it doesn't have to be what we have now. It could be a new metric you think, say, that kind of measure how well we're doing as a library.
I'll look into that.
It was interesting, just to follow up on Longer's point. I did the Park District Scarecrow 5K, and they sent me a satisfaction survey. And it's like, okay, we know you participated, and it might have been 2 minutes, 5 minutes it took me to fill it out. And in a way, it was cool because now they know, and this just happened in the last, month or so, they know now that people felt a certain way and they can put it into planning for next year. So, and there's so many things we can do for free with online customer sat surveys. So just food for thought, that might be one of the things that you incorporate, Tatiana, in what you think are the top 5.
And that's actually run by the Friends of the Park, not the Park District itself.
Okay, sorry.
That's it. I remember, I haven't run it in a while, but I used to run it. I went through a stretch of like 5 or 6 years when I ran it every year.
Well, then they do a good job with their satisfaction.
Any other comments or questions for the director? All right, we'll move along to item 5, which is the Assistant Director's report. Assistant Director McCollum.
Okay, I'll start off with the elevator update. The elevator components have been ordered. That's the fixtures, the controller, and the power unit. Kali Elevator has submitted permit plans to the Village of Lisle, and Kali updated us on their part orders. So we heard this week that the fixtures, that's the button panels, they are due to be received at the end of November. The power supply should ship this week, and the controller will ship in like 6 to 8 days, they said. Johnson Controls is the fire safety company that's working with our elevator modernization, and they have finalized their floor plans and the design for the fire safety. This will be submitted to the village this week, and the plans will probably be reviewed by the fire safety consultants of Elgin, their outside engineering firm, for the village. And I think that's it on the elevator, and unless you want questions now on the elevator.
Just go through your report and then we'll
Okay.
ask the questions. Thank you.
I reviewed several webinars for the staff for the per capita grant that will be focusing on patrons with challenges or disabilities, and staff will be watching Beyond Assistive Technology, improving library services to people with disabilities, and this will complete the education portion of the per capita grant for staff. I also worked with Elizabeth Hopkins and Will Savage, department directors, and we are reviewing Chapter 8 of the standards chapters of serving our public, and that chapter covers reader's advisory and reference services. So there's a checklist that staff goes through and make sure that we're covering all the details, items, suggestions that any library should be doing in that area. Just a reminder that the Winter Read sign-up has a special evening on Friday, September 7th. We'll have hot chocolate, cookies, and live music, and also participants will have a chance to do a special ceramic snowman craft. It involves some painting. Let's see. I participated in a webinar conducting a library facility security assessment. This was done by Dr. Stephen Albrecht. He's pretty well known in the library land for helping with security. And it made a lot of suggestions about looking outside your library, inside your library, also at some of your policies that you do, and just reminded us to take into consideration cost, our culture, and feasibility, and what we can do to improve safety and security in our library. As a follow-up to this webinar, I'm working with the facility monitors and our department directors and hearing their ideas, and we're starting with the outside of the library and looking at the grounds. And so in keeping with our security assessment, as Tatiana mentioned, we installed 2 security cameras, so they're up and running on the west side of the building. That was completed in October, and also Bear Landscaping did some replanting around our flagpole in the front, along Front Street, and this increased our visibility, and which was, for pedestrians, people on bikes, and also cars. And that was one of the goals of looking at your outside of your building. So, and then Tatiana mentioned the ice alert signs that we got up last week, and with it being so cold, everyone's kind of noticing them, so it's kind of been fun to hear patron comments about that sign. And the second one we plan to put on the south side, where the railing is on the south side of the parking lot over there. That's it.
Thank you. Are there questions for the assistant director?
The 2 new security cameras, is that precautionary or are we addressing a problem?
It was just one part of the building that really wasn't covered by the cameras. And it is kind of a, that's where the HVAC system is for that. So just make sure that, keep people off of there.
Other questions for the assistant director?
The no dumping sign, was there a problem with dumping?
Yes.
Oh, no.
I have a comment on this next section, but I don't know whose section it is, so why don't you go
I'm gonna ask a
ahead?
question. Okay, so do we have an idea about when the elevator will finally be finished? Sometime in December, are we thinking? Are we thinking it could go into January?
Oh,
Well-
gosh, I hope not.
I've had questions from
Yeah.
patrons about the elevator.
Well, I think we're hoping that once both sets of plans, the fire protection plans and the plans for the actual physical elevator are approved by the village's outsourced inspection company, that Collie has told us, or Colleen's told us that they can get going pretty quickly.
Okay.
So,
Fingers crossed?
Yeah, fingers
Knock on
crossed. I don't
wood,
want to give
don't
a
know.
date, but it's kind of out of our hands at this
Right.
moment.
But it's December, January timeframe
For
is what
sure.
you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the elevator is functioning.
Right. We are.
We are riding with the patrons, staff are riding with them, and we're doing good. The elevator has stalled, but staff have intervened, and it's been good.
You got a question about the marketing?
I just wanted to say that the Lisle Women's Club thanks you very much for putting your box of scarves for us to collect scarves. They're scarves for veterans. We got a total of 480 scarves. Every year they have us do scarves because of all the support we get from folks in and out of the library and other places. So thank you very much.
Thank the Women's Club. Any other questions for the Assistant Director? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, which is committee reports. Finance, Treasurer Wayne.
Yes, we, Finance Committee met on October 22nd. We reviewed the investment strategy policies and fund balance, so all these 3 policy updates is included in the agenda for the board approval. We also, as a team, we talked about our Finance Committee goal. One of our goals for this year is to create a better cash flow forecast, but that also continue upon getting some understanding on how the strategic direction of the library going forward as well, in addition to some of the minor capital projects in terms of use of funds. The second thing we kind of float around was, I think we're going to get audit report in December, right?
Yeah.
So after that, I think as a Finance Committee initially, but for the board, we want to bring up, probably going to want to review our investment firm and audit firm as well for next year's, engagement. So those are the 2 things.
All right, other questions for the Treasurer?
And I agree with reviewing the auditor. You should do that every so many years anyhow, so I agree with that.
I have a question, and longer, I don't know if this was in our Finance Committee meeting or at some point. Did we talk about potentially eliminating one of those funds? I think it was called Working Cash Fund, because or was it at the last board meeting? And I think, Beth, did you say that we really can't use the money in that fund because it was meant for when we opened or something?
No, you can use the money. It's if we wouldn't have received property taxes. That's what it's for. But when the library was established, that fund was enacted. But there are statutory guidelines regarding dissolving that fund. I've looked into it, and I think it was at Finance Committee we mentioned it.
Okay.
And that we would look into what it would take to do that legally, because there are things you have to go through before you do that.
Okay, thanks.
It was the Finance Committee, October 22nd.
Yes, and I think we can take it as a follow-up action to report back to the board next time.
Any other questions for the Treasurer? All right, personnel policy.
Nothing to report, although if we pass our strategic plan tonight, then I'd like to sit down with Tatiana and see what policies flow from that between now and the next meeting. So we probably will have a meeting in January.
Okay.
All right. Physical plant.
It's probably the same thing where we will, once we pass the strategic plan, maybe come up with a big picture of how you want to tackle some of the physical plant stuff.
Okay.
Strategic Planning Committee has served its purpose and will be dissolved.
I think you retired, maybe.
Retire, yes, thank you. Proper terminology. Item 7 on the agenda is unfinished business. I don't believe we have any unfinished business before us. So we'll move along to item 8, which is new business. Item 8A is the approve the Lisle Library District 2019-2022 strategic plan.
I make a motion to approve the Lisle Library District 2019 through 2022 strategic plan.
I second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
I'd just like to say, in the packet, you have the final draft with the minor changes as recommended by the committee in October. There is one more question, though, I have to bring up, because and it's splitting hairs, but in the executive summary, it mentions we had 9 meetings, and about a half hour ago, we had a 10th meeting. So do you want me just to change that to 10, just to be technically correct?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Outside of that, this draft is ready for your vote. I just want to thank again the committee for the thoughtful discussion and for crafting what I believe to be a solid plan for the next 3 years.
Any further discussion on the motion?
So, Jay, so what's your expectation in terms of implementation? So are we thinking about, for example, I take, in my finance committee meeting, I look at this and say what finance committee can do in support of the implementation, or how do you view that, beyond now we agree on the strategic plan?
I think we've already heard from the personnel policy and the physical plant chairman that, this is going to be sort of the driving force on what, some of their agenda is going to be going forward. And I see that the same way with the finance committee and with us as a board and with staff. This is sort of our guiding document that's going to lead us as we go through the next 3 years.
Yeah, and then what I'm kind of thinking is, we are asking Tatiana and her team to have a goal that's going to be aligned with strategic plan. I think as committee chair of individual committees, we should also have our goals for next year and what will be, and share with the rest of the board as well, and track our progress toward it.
That's a good idea.
One type of discussion we never did have in the 10 strategic plan meetings, we talked a lot about the micro issues and a lot about objectives, what I'm calling objectives. I think the plan calls them methods. But one discussion we never did have was what exactly are we building toward? What's the picture of the library that we want to have in 3 years? For instance, do we want the library to be a prominent place in our community, where we describe what prominent means? Do we want the library to call attention to itself and its services and the stories of the patrons? We haven't had that discussion. Do we want to build community? Do we want the library to play a role in building community? Do we want the library to be a leader in information access and innovation? Do we want to continue our premier patron services and professionalism, our staff professionalism, what I've always thought is our highest value, our highest resource? Do we want to continue expanding services to diverse patron groups, not just ethnic groups, but educational levels, professional levels, age levels? Do we want to create reasons for non-users to become users? So I don't say that, I don't say these things because I'm going to oppose the strategic plan, but I do think that we should continue talking about these things. The plan isn't quite finished, however we vote tonight. We should continue to think about these things and express to our community what they mean to us and what we're trying to build for them over the next 3 years.
I don't think that the plan, Richard, is the be-all and end-all, and I think that's, is a good stepping off point. That's certainly appropriate for the board to discuss many of the things that you raised as well.
I agree with everything you listed. I think the plan is our frame, and implementing some of the objectives, I think the details come during our 3 years of seeking what is important at the time. Again, we have the framework there. Details will come.
Yes, the plan is the framework. The plan is the bridge. But what I'm saying is that we're overdue for a discussion about these meta issues, these values discussions. It would have been nice to have them earlier, but no harm. There's still plenty of time to talk about these things.
We have 3 years to talk about it.
Not 3. We don't want to start in year 3.
No,
We want to start
but
in
we
year
have
1.
3, and we can start every board meeting, we discuss them.
I would like also just to
Up to the
point
board.
out that I think it was our second meeting, maybe our third. I said we'll probably finish this up around October or November. So we're right on target.
Any other comments, discussion? All right, then roll call, please.
Thomas Hummel,
Yes.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swistek,
Aye.
Lonnie Wayne,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Richard Flint,
Aye.
Jay Fisher.
Aye. Motion passes, the strategic plan is approved, and like Tatiana said, I want to thank all the committee members as well as staff for, I thought it was a very thoughtful and deliberate process that ended up with, I think, a very excellent product. So thank you all. And as been said, this is our framework moving forward for the next 3 years. Move along then to 8B, adopt ordinance 18-06 levy.
I make a motion to adopt ordinance 18.06, the levy. You want me to read the rest of it or just the levy? Good enough?
Okay, you want to read that?
All right. Well, annual ordinance levying taxes for corporate purposes for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There is a motion and a second. Discussion. Do you want to
Sure.
start us off?
Okay. I've prepared draft tax levy 18-06. Our attorney has reviewed this document and has provided the informational footnotes throughout. This levy is $212,955 less than last year's requested amount. It comes to about a 4.93% decrease. This levy also documents the intent to cease levying for the .02 Building and Maintenance Fund, and there are footnotes there to that affirm that decision. And then regarding all of the special funds, the .02, the FICA, the IMRF, we use what we call the Miller analysis regarding maintaining appropriate balances in those special accounts. And this draft levy reflects appropriate amounts there. And so with that, I recommend that the board approve tax levy ordinance 18-06.
I'm going to vote in favor of the levy. This is the second year plus 5 days that we appointed Tatiana to become our director, so happy second anniversary.
Thank you.
One of the charges that board gave to her was to take a different approach to levying, a different approach to budgeting, protect our core values, our core services, our core vision and mission, but in the spirit of the times and in the spirit of her own approach to budgeting, to trim a little, see what we can trim. And so I think that it's a good levy. It does represent our values. It probably cuts a little too much. We have to be aware of overcutting, but it doesn't hurt us. I think a couple of lines in the staff development got trimmed rather more than I would like to see. And you can't cut every year. Last year we cut 10%. This year, what is the percentage?
Just under 5.
And what do we project to be the interest from our investments?
I don't have
It's
that.
about
at the top of my-
5%, I think.
No, we don't have 5%.
For next year is about 5%. So it's good. We can't cut every year. Someone showed me something on social media where they said, last year we cut 10%, this year we cut 5%, so there's 15%. No, you don't add percentages like that. Nevertheless, it's a modest cut, it's a reasonable cut. We do have to start thinking in terms of where we're going to invest as well as where we're going to cut. Nevertheless, I'm going to support the levy, and I recommend that all 7 of us do. And thank you, Tatiana. This was the work of the staff, and this was the vision of the previous board, and I'm glad that we're continuing along this same narrative that we started 2 years ago.
Can I ask a quick question?
No, go ahead.
Um,
No, go ahead.
On page 73, we talk about the Miller analysis. Did we also do a Miller analysis for the corporate fund?
The Miller analysis is used to see regarding special funds. So the corporate fund is not considered a special.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Or,
Sorry, go ahead.
Liz, is that,
Yeah, I just didn't know.
okay.
Thanks.
Tom?
The previous board never tasked the director of cutting taxes, and you could look at the history of the previous board never cutting taxes. I do thank the director for the last two levies, and I also think this current board. There's no doubt in my mind, if the previous board was still here, they would be still raising taxes. So that was all fiction, what we just heard. So thank you.
You know, I take exception to that. We can disagree, but don't say that what I said was fiction, because we can disagree. I think you are incorrect, but what I said wasn't fiction. Perhaps you misunderstood it.
Any other comments or discussion?
Yeah, I think Tatiana definitely did a good job in this whole year-over-year reduction, and without, cutting back on services, and while give people clear objectives and what's supposed to accomplish. I think it's a good budget and a good working plan going forward.
And I'd like to echo what Richard and Tom and Laundrie said, that, I'd like to thank the staff for their diligent work, doing a lot of analysis and preparation for this. So, thank you. Seeing no other discussion, then we'll have a roll call, please. The motion is to approve ordinance 1806, the levy, as presented.
Liz Sullivan,
Yes. Aye.
Emily Swistek,
Aye.
Lauren Ray Wang,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Richard Flint,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel,
Aye.
Jay Fisher.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Ordinance 1806, the levy is approved. Item 8C goes along with our administrative responsibilities, which is the certification of compliance with the Truth in Taxation Act. Need a motion to approve the annual certificate of compliance with the Truth in Taxation law.
I move to approve certification of compliance with TDA.
All right.
A second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Emily Swistek,
Aye.
Lauren Ray Wang,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Richard Flint,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Jay Fisher.
Aye. By 7-0, we have approved our certification that we are in compliance with the Truth in Taxation Act. Item 8D is the approval of the Lisle Library District investment strategy. We need to accept the updated investment strategy as prepared by the investment firm and reviewed by the Finance Committee.
I move to approve the updated LLD investment strategy as prepared by investment firm, other investment partners.
Thank you, Treasurer Wang. Is there a second?
I second.
There is a motion and a second. Do you wish any discussion?
I
to
can
the-
just say, yeah, on October 22nd, as Treasurer Ring mentioned, the Finance Committee met. Eller's representative provided us with a draft, and then the committee suggested some edits to that, and so we're looking to approve the strategy because it's referenced in our policy 720 as well. So all of the edits are within the draft that were in the packet.
Anything you'd like to add, Treasurer?
Yeah, so there's no major shift in our investment strategy as outlined compared with the previous year. We did acknowledge as a committee that we do have high liquidity in passive investment funds, which means not in Eller's investment fund, but we made a deliberate effort because right now the interest environment is favorable to put that in passive investment fund versus being actively managed by Eller. So we can review this on an annual basis as the economic condition changes.
Questions or discussions?
Yeah. Laundrie, maybe we talked about this in finance, but how does Ellers bill us? Is it a percentage?
Yes, under percentage of asset under management.
Got it.
And is is it just a flat percentage, or is it different based on the type
There's a
of?
tier, yeah,
A tier,
hit to,
okay.
yes. But on average, we pay about $500 to $550 a month. So that's also another opportunity to look at other investment firms to just compare and contrast, because we have been with them for probably 3-4 years now, right?
Yes.
4 years.
Yeah.
In the past, I don't think we even had an investment firm to manage our account, didn't we?
We did.
We did?
We did.
Okay, I don't
I
know why,
remember the name of
how we
it.
picked Eller, because I wasn't part of it, but, so, and we also asked them to give us a better benchmark to say how well our investment is compared with whatever benchmark we want to pick. So he's actually going to create a benchmark that will mimic our investment portfolio. So we'll see what happens.
And I believe that was hopefully getting done.
With their
the
new
end of-
software or something.
Yeah, with the
Yeah,
end
they
of
have new
this year,
software.
beginning of
Yes,
this year with the
yes,
software
yeah,
upgrade that they were doing.
yes, yeah. In the past, we have just used TBL, which is not really representative of our investment portfolio.
And I think he was going to calculate our investments net of fees.
Correct, yes. Yeah, right now it's gross.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right, then, roll call, please.
Long Ray Wang,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Richard Flint,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swisdale.
Aye.
Motion passes. The investment strategy is approved. We continue with the Finance Committee work with item 8E, which is the approved LLD Policy 710, fund balances.
I move to approve the LLD policy 710 fund balances.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
There is a motion and a second. Discussion. Treasurer, do you wish?
It's,
Tatiana did a great job in terms of simplify this, because this is really hard to read. So she was able to clean up a lot of redundancies in this, make it more understandable. And the most important is she also put some examples at the bottom on those 4 or 5 major fund categories as well. So that's very helpful for users.
I was going to give you both credit for doing that, but you're giving Tatiana the credit, so I'm going to second that. It is so much easier to understand, and I think you both are responsible for that, so thank you.
All right, is there further questions or discussion for the treasurer on policy 710? Seeing none then, roll call please.
Marjorie Bartelli,
aye.
Richard Flint,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swisdale,
Aye.
Long Ray Wang.
Aye.
I vote 6-0. The changes to policy 710 have been approved. Continuing with the Finance Committee new business, item 8F is the approval LLD policy 720 investments.
I move to approve LLD policy 720 investments.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Wish to opine on policy 720?
Yeah, for policy 720, again, thanks again, Tatiana, for your effort in cleaning up this policy. We don't really have a major changes to this. Again, it just to make sure that language is consistent.
All right, any questions or comments?
Unless I'm mistaken, what we're saying then is for policies 710 and 720, the changes were grammatical?
Yes, a lot of them just make it more clear and easier to understand and read.
Yeah, I think there was more than grammatics, I think it was clarification. Because I remember going through this in our meetings, and there were some things, that we were, like who's the investment officer? If it is the treasurer, name the treasurer. So we added a lot of clarification.
And we
Yeah,
changed
good.
periodically to quarterly, so that's a little more than a grammatical change, that's more specific.
Yes.
But it was mostly,
Mostly clarification, I think that's probably a good word, yeah, for it. No major policy shift, let's say, than before.
any further discussion or questions?
The only question I have in regards, just as an aside, just as a refresher, whatever happened with those Illinois funds? Remember, there was the trouble with those investments, the Illinois funds? Did it get settled, right? Or is it
I think it's
still-
still-
No, that's still.
Still outstanding?
Still
Yeah, it's still
outstanding.
happening.
I think it's probably good just to bring some of the new members up to date too. Maybe there's one of the next time we'll have finance committee, as a committee, we review what the status of it and what is the latest forecast.
Yeah.
Is there any forecasting we're ever going to settle this, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, further comments or questions for the treasurer? Hearing none, then roll call, please.
Richard Flynn.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Emily Swistay.
Aye.
Lori Wang.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
By a vote of 6-0, the board has approved the modifications to the policy 720 on investments. Moving to new business, item 8G, trustee conference report. We had the conference in Peoria. I believe Richard was the only
I
one
attended
today?
2 talks, one on fundraising, and then I attended my own talk. The fundraising talk was very good. A couple of bullet points. The talk was presented by the director and the assistant director and made it most clear that the administration takes the lead in these fundraising efforts. Didn't address the legalities of it, but did address the fact that it's a really good idea. The board will support and provide some level of resources, and the administration takes the lead in that. Made the point that these fundraising efforts, and this library is very active, they're very labor intensive. It's very hard work, very long hours. In fact, made the point that many employees volunteer their time for this, and they must be careful that those who do not volunteer, it does not reflect badly on them, and those who do volunteer doesn't unduly support them. And it's not used in their evaluation. They're in the status of volunteers. And also made a point that I had made a few months ago in one of our strategic planning committees when we were talking about fundraising, and I said, you know, you really can't affect to raise enough in funds to affect your bottom line very much, certainly not your levy. And I said, you maybe 1% maximum, which for us would be $50,000. And that's exactly what they said. They raise about 1% of the equivalent of 1% of their levy. Then I gave my own talk on quantitative analysis for librarians. I'm happy with the way it went. It was more like a seminar. It wasn't an auditorium talk, although I had almost as many people in there as would have been in an auditorium talk. I gave I started it off, I gave about 20 or 30 minutes of basics, foundational talk, why you would never use a pie chart, never report statistics with a pie chart. We had some discussion about outliers. One guy asked me, he said, where you can test for outliers? Yes, there is. It's one of the first things I talk about in my courses. And also what types of data. One attendee indicated that something they're measuring grows by a percentage every year, a certain percentage every year. And how should they report that? And I'm very glad they asked that question because that's mistaken a lot. A lot of people just add them up and divide by the number of years, and that's what they want. That doesn't mean anything. That's the arithmetic mean. You would never use the arithmetic mean for that sort of situation. It's a different type of data. One gentleman brought up a very good idea. He said, what do you think? Of course, they were mainly employees. I don't know if there were any trustees there, but they knew I was a trustee. And they said, what do you think about using a dashboard for your budget preparation? I think that's a very good idea, especially since we're only a couple of months away from the next budget cycle. Rather than reinventing the wheel every year, a dashboard where the categories are set out and you just tweak them according to what your priorities are that year. I think, Tatiana, you and your staff might look into whether that makes sense for you. I talked a fair amount about some advanced Excel functionality like the if functions. Excel has a suite of if functions, and got into a little bit of VBA, Visual Basic for Analysis. And this came up to why you wouldn't want to use cost-benefit analysis to track your progress to a certain objective. It doesn't make any sense, certainly not for an institution our size. So it was very good. It was a long drive for a 1-hour talk, but then a long drive home, and I still had to teach my night class when I got there, but I'm glad I went. It was good.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Why no pie chart? I'm just curious.
Because it's hard to gauge the relative size of the pie slices. If one pie slice represents 20% and one represents 25%, it's really hard to see it.
But if you have a number next to it,
Yeah,
so
most
visually.
People, most people are visual. They're not going to read the legend.
Well, I was saying if you had the pie chart with the number next to it.
Yeah, that's what I mean by legend. It's just there's better ways to represent data than with pies.
I like pies.
Or maybe the gang chart, that's what maybe Richard like.
All right. Any other questions for Richard? Well, thank you for that update, Richard. We will move on to item 9, which is opportunity for trustee comments. We'll start this month with Marjorie. We'll start at the beginning of the alphabet.
None, thank you.
I don't have anything either. Trustee Flynn?
Well, I want to use my 5 minutes this month. I haven't used it yet. I wanted to talk about holidays are upon us and what I'm reading. This is a used book I got at one of our used book sales. Citizenship, a very short introduction. This is an excellent, I won't say it's easily readable. It's written for graduate level students, but if you work hard, you can read about the history, the philosophy, about citizenship, what citizenship means, and why it's this conflicts between the values of citizenship and those of multiculturalism, the wealth gap, globalization. It's all in here. It's a very good study of what citizenship means. I also picked this up, not necessarily at the last book sale, but recently, The Politics of Rich and Poor. I read this by Kevin Phillips. It's a little bit dated, but it is what it says. It's about the upward distribution of wealth in the last 30 years. I read a very good book that I had to return because it was interlibrary loan, but Hitler's American Novel by a man named James Q. Whitaker, which discussed the Nuremberg laws, Hitler's Nuremberg laws about citizenship and racial purity, and how those laws were explicitly modeled on the laws this country passed in the 19th century, the Jim Crow laws, the laws restricting Eastern immigration in the 1920s. I mean, the Nazi lawyers looked very long and hard at our laws and said, those are some good laws. So it's food for thought. The rest of here that Emily made fun of a few minutes ago, this is for next month. So those are some books that I'm reading.
Just the stack. They were.
This is a small stack. I gave a few talks over the last few weeks. I love to give presentations. In Carroll Stream last month, I gave a talk on the history of Chicago's mayors. And now that there's going to be a vacancy in the big chair on the 5th floor in City Hall, it was especially interesting, and a lot of people had ideas about who's going to fill Mayor Emanuel's spot. The Lisle Historical Heritage Society were as nice as they could be to me a few weeks ago when I gave a talk about Chicago during World War I. What Chicago was like and how it changed as a result of the war. The mayor at the time, who was the last Republican to hold the mayor's chair, Big Bill Thompson, and his friendship with Al Capone, and also the publisher of the Trib, Colonel McCormick, who owned what became Cantini Park. They told me at the beginning, I said, how long should I talk? They said, as long as you want, which is a terrible, dangerous thing to tell me. But it was so much fun. And I think no one left early, I'll say that. Also, last Friday, I screened a World War I era picture. World War I is one of my favorite hobbies. All Quiet on the Western Front in LaGrange Park. It's a little bit long. I'm not sure I'd show it again because it's over 2 hours. But again, nobody left. Their attention was rapt, and we talked about the Great War, as I prefer to call it. And some of the attendees had living memory of their grandparents who were in the war. One lady said her grandfather worked for President Wilson. And we talked about how Wilson had a stroke in office and Edith became the first woman president. Also, if you wander by Starbucks over the next 5 weeks before the Christian holidays, you might see me sitting outside playing my mandolin. The boss at Starbucks, the store manager, and I've made this a tradition, said I could sit outside and play Christmas songs. So if you stop by on a day that's not too frigid, that's what I'll be doing. That's my talk.
Thank you,
It's not
Richard.
5 minutes.
Vice President Hummel?
Well, the only thing I was going to just mention too, which was in the director's report briefly, was there's some veterans programs via the Secretary of State, in case there's any veterans out there watching the tape. It's Veterans History Project for some of your experiences in the military, and then there's also the special programs for veterans that may be returning from overseas. And then also, which was also in the director's report, I did attend the Veterans Day event last Sunday morning at the memorial. And then also the silent parade that came through the meadows. I know, talking to a lot of neighbors, they did enjoy that, so that was a good event. So that's all I had.
Do you need that, those sheets? Yeah, my husband's a vet.
Yeah, I think
have
they're-
it.
they're
It's
all-
in your
they're all in
mailbox.
there.
That's
in
the
your
one
mailbox.
that's in the
Yep.
mailbox?
Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee Swistek?
Oh, is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Um,
Nope, sorry.
No.
It's Trustee Sullivan's turn.
I was like,
I got ahead of myself.
I was just gonna suggest, if we wanna accomplish a lot, it helped me, and I don't know if you guys ever tracked projects in something simple like an Excel spreadsheet. Like who's assigned, what are the action items, what are the dates that they're due, and things like that. So that's just future if we wanna track projects. It'd be helpful for me.
Now,
now it's my
Trustee
turn.
Swistek.
I just wanted to thank Tatiana for all of her hard work on the levy.
Thank you. And Treasurer White?
Me save for the best for last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kidding. So the reason I was
Next month we'll start with you.
so the reason I kind of talk a little bit more about the metrics is because our company this time of the year, right, they always kind of start to talk about what your next year objective is. So now we're implementing what Google has been implementing for a long time. I don't know if many of you guys heard of it. It's called OKRs. So that's objectives and key results. So they have been implemented for almost probably close to about 10 years that they really believe have helped propel their success. And it was kind of interesting because it's a learning experience for me because every year you have objectives and everybody says it should be measurable, you know, it should be quantifiable and all that good stuff. But this OKR is a little different is number one, it's not a performance measurement tool. It's actually help from the top of the house to individual employees understand what are the kind of top OKRs has to be no more than 5. Can't be anything more than that. And then the key results you want to achieve you lay out that will support accomplish of these objectives. And these objectives should be a little bit more stretchy, so it's kind of a tad uncomfortable. And so therefore the target is you're not supposed to complete 100%, be like 60 to 70% accomplished. That's actually pretty good. So for objectives not for example, didn't get accomplished by the end of the year, for example, only 40% accomplished, then you come back to say, is that the right objective, or should you find other way to accomplish it? So you kind of talk about you should set quarterly OKRs and also annual OKRs, and then should be visible across the company. So for example, Google, if you in their employee directory, if you look for somebody's name, right next to it is their OKRs, and also what previous year their scores are, and to this year what OKRs are. So if you want to help, if you want to get help from this individual on your project, you take a look at what the OKRs to say, could what I'm asking for help them achieve their OKRs? So anyhow, so we're still in the learning experience. I thought it's interesting. I'm not sure how adaptable it is to like this more this non-for-profit organization. But Tatiana, I kind of welcome you to take a look at it and see if not all, but maybe parts of it, could help you as you help set the objectives for your staff.
Okay.
So that's my speech.
Thank you all. That brings us to the end of our monthly meeting. Is there a motion?
I move to adjourn.
There is a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.